Hello everybody and welcome to our new episode, which is going to be based on Overview Textbook Series Grade 12. Today I'll be dealing with Module 4, Unit 11, Grammar. I'm going to deal with the passive voice. If you are interested in my lesson, please keep watching our channel. See you after the break. Dear students, welcome back to our virtual infinite educational program. As I have already said, today we're dealing with Module 4, Unit 11. I'm going to deal with the passive voice, something which I think you are familiar with. I'm trying to answer three very important questions, which are, what is the passive voice? Why is passive voice used in English language? And the last question is, how passive voice sentences are formulated. Generally speaking, in English language, we have what we call a sentence. If a sentence contains a transitive verb, so the sentence has to be consisted of these three elements: the subject, the verb, and the object. Most of the time, at the beginning of the sentence, we put the subject, which is the doer or the performer of the verb. And here, today we are talking about transitive or detransitive verbs. Then after the verb, we have the object, which is something or someone the action is performed on. Let's take an example. As you can see here, the news vendor sells newspapers. This is a simple sentence consisting of three main components. The first one is the news vendor, then the verb, which is sells, and then we have the object, which comes after the transitive verb. This is called an active sentence. Now let's concentrate on the verb of the sentence. In English language, the verb can be either active, to be put in an active sentence, or a passive verb to be put in a passive sentence. Now, every passive verb consists of two components. The first one is to conjugate verb to be in one of the English language tenses, then followed by the past participle of the main verb of the active sentence. In order to be able to make correct passive sentences in English, you have to know two very important things. The first thing is to be able to conjugate verb to be in all the tenses of English language. For example, if your teacher asks you to conjugate the verb to be in the present simple, you should provide the following answers: is or am or are. If you are asked to provide the simple past of verb to be, you should provide was and were. Then the future will be, then the present continuous is am, are plus verb plus ing. Then the present perfect, consisting of two elements, has been and have been, or the past perfect. This is the first thing. The second thing is to have a good memorization for the irregular verbs in English language in order to be able to turn the main verb of the sentence into a verbal, which is called the past participle. For example, verb to be, if you are asked to change verb to be into the past participle of verb to be, you will provide been. Now let's move to passive with modal verbs. For example, if you have in an active sentence a modal like can, you will say can be plus the past participle of the verb. Could, of course, could be, will be, would be, and so on. Okay? The last one is have to, so you have to provide have to be, or has to be, or had to be. As you can see here, all the modals are followed by the infinitive of verb to be, which is called bare infinitive, without to. Now let's go back to our original sentence. The news vendor sells newspapers. As we have already said, this is an active sentence, right? Now, if you want to put this sentence into passive voice, you have to provide something like this. Newspapers are sold by the news vendor. As you can see here, the sentence starts with the object of the original active sentence. So the passive refers to verb groups whose subject is the person or thing that is affected by an action. Now let's try to talk in a detailed way by moving to the second question. Why is the passive voice used in English language? So we're going to speak about the functions. Why are passive sentences used? A, we resort to passive sentence if we want to change the focus of the sentence, which means that the agent or the doer of the action is very well known. For example, my little brother always tears my books. If you have a naughty boy, so you know in advance that if your books are torn, so the doer is known. If you want to put this sentence in the passive voice, you just say, my books are always torn by my little brother, and you notice here that by my little brother is put into between two parentheses, which means that this piece of information is not necessary in the sentence, then you can get rid of it, and you put your full stop, and you will get full mark. The second case is when the agent is unknown, which means the subject, the doer, or the performer is known by nobody. For example, somebody broke my window. Who broke your window? Of course, you don't know. In this case, you have to say, my window was broken. The third case is when you have a scientific writing or technical writing. Most of the time, in scientific reports, you will know you don't find the subject of the verb. So, for example, we can say germs can cause diseases. This is an active sentence. In scientific writing, most of the time, you will find diseases can be caused by germs. Now, so far, we have answered two questions. What is passive voice? Why is the passive voice used in English language? Now, our last question, which is the focus of this lesson, is how. So, the question is, how are passive voice sentences formulated? In order to change the focus, or in order to turn an active sentence into a passive sentence, you need to go through three very important steps. The first one is to put the object at the beginning of your sentence. Where is the place of the object? The object is always after the verb. Then you have to conjugate verb to be at the same time of the main verb of the active sentence. The last stage is to turn the main verb into a verbal by providing the past participle form of the main verb of the active sentence. Let's take some examples. Again, back to our sentence. I try to stick and to fix myself to the same sentence in order to make things easier and simpler for you. The news vendor sells newspapers. We'd like to turn this sentence or formulate the sentence from active sentence into a passive sentence. So the first thing you have to do is to get rid of the doer or of the subject of the sentence. Why? Because it's no longer important in the passive voice sentence. Then we have to bring the object of the active sentence at the beginning of the passive sentence, with, of course, some amendments. You have to put the capital letter at the beginning of the word. The third step is to think of the right tense of verb to be, which goes hand in hand with the main verb of the original sentence, which is the active sentence. For example, here the verb is in the simple present. Why? Because you have, okay, the suffix, the grammar suffix s at the end of the verb. So you have to think of is or am or are. Go back to the list of the verb to be. So we have the verb sells, which contains s at the end of the verb. Now, what list are you going to choose from among these options? Of course, you are going to focus on is, am, and are. Putting in head that our object is in the plural. Why? Because it is containing an s at the end. You have to choose, of course, the verb are. So the sentence should look like this. Newspapers are, and then you have to think of the past participle form of the verb sell, which is sold. So the active sentence has just been formulated or made into passive voice. Newspapers are sold. After that, you can bring back the information which is related to the news vendor by putting it here by the news vendor. So our sentence, newspapers are sold by the news vendor. Let's take another example. Astronauts can carry out experiments on board the International Space Station. This is a simple sentence consisting of a subject followed by the main verb of the sentence, which is here phrasal verb, followed by or following the modal can. Then we have to decide on the object, which is most of the time after the verb. And here we have prepositional phrase, which is not important when we turn the sentence into passive voice. Now we'd like to concentrate on two main components to make our passive sentence this way. So this is the verb and this is the object. Now our burden or our task now is to get rid of all the pieces of information that you have in your active sentence, just to concentrate and to avoid making mistakes. So the first thing you have to do is, as we have already agreed upon, start with the object, which is experiments. Then we have to use be form of the main verb. We have carry or can carry out. If you have a modal followed by a verb, as we have already agreed upon, we have to put it this way, can be. After that, you have to add the past participle of the main verb, which is here the phrasal verb carry out. It is a regular verb, so what you have to do is to add only ed for the verb. And then we go back to the preposition phrase on board of the International Space Station. So our passive voice sentence is experiments can be carried out on board the International Space Station. Now, through my experience, I have noticed that some of you make some very common mistakes. I'd like to present them for you in order to avoid making them when I move to the second phase of this lesson, which is the practical phase. The first common mistake that some of you make is the following. Some of you change the tense of the active sentence into a similar tense in the passive sentence, which means, let's get an example. Someone has reported the incidents. This is an active sentence. Some of you may say the incidents were reported, being tricked into believing that the verb of the sentence is reported. Okay, the verb holds ed, which means that it can be a verb, which is the past simple of verb to report, or it could be a verbal, the past participle of the verb to report. Putting in mind that our main verb is has reported, so here we are in front of present perfect. It's not the simple past, and this way your choice or your answer is not correct. So the correct sentence should be has been or have been. Why? Because the original verb is put in the present perfect. Now, this S is extremely important because it will give you the chance to choose only one choice, which is have been, because the object here is the incident, which is put in the plural. So the correct answer is the incidents have been reported. Let's move to another example. He is going to open the door. This is one kind of expressing the future tense in English language by using be going to plus the verb. Some of you may give the following answer. The door will be opened, thinking that future times can replace each other, which is not correct. So here what you have to do, you have to focus on the original tense of the verb, which is going to open. So will be is not correct. The correct answer should be the following. The door is going to be opened. And here we have to stick to the same tense. The second common mistake that some of you may commit is the following. Forgetting about verb to be in the passive sentence. Someone has robbed the bank. Some of you may say, the bank has robbed, which is not correct. The original tense is has robbed, so it is present perfect. We have to stick to the same tense by providing has been or have been followed by the past participle of the verb rob. Another example, he is calling the police. Some of you may say the police are called, which is not correct. Why? Because the original sentence is not simple present, it's present continuous. So we have to stick to the same tense by providing the following answer, the police are being called. The third mistake, which is extremely common among you, is using the present participle, which means verb plus ing, instead of the past participle of the verb. Let's take an example. Hackers have secretly used the information in my computer systems. Some of you may say the information in my computer systems has been secretly used by hackers, which is not correct. What you need here after the past participle of verb to be is the past participle of use, which is used. The fourth common mistake is the following. It's to confuse between the plural and the singular of the active as well as the passive voice. Let's take an example. Everybody has to follow the traffic rules. So if you start your sentence by the traffic rules, we cannot say has. Why? Because the object is in the plural. Here, the object is in the plural, the traffic rules, so have to be followed. Now let's move to your student's book, page 86, in which you have the following exercise. So task 1, exercise number 1, change the passive sentences into active sentences and vice versa. Astronauts should be rewarded by the government. Here we notice that astronaut is the first part of the sentence, followed by should be rewarded, which is a modal, followed by a be, and the past participle of the word reward. So we are here in front of the passive sentence, and by will make things clear for you. So what you have to do here is to bring the original subject of the active sentence with some amendments, so the government. Then we have to focus on should be, which is a modal followed by be, and the verb, which is in the past participle. If you have a sentence like this, make sure that the past participle here is the original verb of the active sentence. So what you have to do here is to change should be rewarded into should reward. So the government should reward who? The astronauts, with some amendments. You get the final sentence. So astronauts should be rewarded by the government will be the government should reward astronauts. Let's take another example. Each astronaut has to wear a spacesuit. Get rid of the subject. Then decide on the object of the sentence. Bring it at the beginning of the sentence, a spacesuit. Now go to the verb, which is a modal verb, has to plus wear. Make sure that your answer is has to be worn or have to be worn. In this case, you have to choose has because a spacesuit is a singular, and we bring by each astronaut. So the original sentence, each astronaut has to be wear a space shape, a suit becomes a spacesuit has to be worn by each astronaut. Let's take another example. Space shuttles can transport equipment into space. Again, get rid of the subject, decide on the object, move it to at the beginning of the sentence, so equipment, decide on the verb, which is a modal verb here followed by transport. Change it into can be transported, can, modal verb, plus be, plus verb in the past participle, into space, and then bring by space shuttles. So the sentence, space shuttles can transport equipment into space, becomes equipment can be transported into space by shape shuttles. Let's move to task 2. Choose the correct answer from A, B, C, and D. The sentence says, as you can read here, the news about the lost boats delivered today. We have 4 obstacles here. Are, have, has to be, have delivered. You have to choose one among them. In order to choose one, you have to decide on the subject of the verb. Before the blank here, we have 2 nouns. The subject can be news or can be boats. In this case, you have prepositional phrase boats, so we don't need it. The subject is news. And knowing that the news is an uncountable noun, so we should consider it as if it were a singular noun. So our answer should be in the singular. We have to omit be, and we have to forget about have delivered. So our answer is has to be delivered today. Number 2, the report from the meeting up right now. You have to choose one among these choices. So the helping word is right now, so we are dealing with the present continuous. We have to forget about have been typed and are typed and concentrate on is being typed and are being typed. And since here we have a singular subject, so our choice is being typed, and we have to forget about are, which goes with plural subjects. Another example, scientists discoveries about Venus by using probes. Again here we have to decide on the subject, which is scientists, discoveries, which is an object. So here we are in front of an active sentence. In this case, we have to forget about the passive sentence, the passive verbs, which are have been made, will be made. So the answer should be either have made or is making. And since scientists is a plural subject, so our choice is have made. Now let's move to the last example. The moon on for the first time in July 1969. If you want to look for the helping word in the sentence, it's July 1996, so we are using the simple past. We have to focus on the simple past here, so we have to forget about can be landed, is landed, has been landed. Our answer is was landed. Now the last task, task 3, correct the 2 underlined mistakes in each sentence. The wall must be built before the end of the month with the builder. Here we have the modal must followed by be. So build here is put in the infinitive, which is not correct. The correct answer is built, putting in mind that must be followed by the past participle of the verb. And here we have the builder, so he is the doer, which comes at the end of the sentence. It must be preceded by the preposition by. Another example, the boy can be driven the toy car by herself. Okay, this is an active sentence. We should not put the passive sentence here because we have a subject boy and the object the toy car. So our answer must be can drive. And since we talk about the boy, whose personal pronoun is he, so herself must be put or replaced by himself. Another example, the report should write and represented in TV as soon as possible. Here we have the conjunction and, which is extremely important, followed by it can be a verb in the simple past or verbal in the past participle. So write here is not correct. We have to choose either wrote or written. And putting in mind that here we have a modal should, that should be followed by be. In this case, we have to forget about wrote and concentrate on written. So the sentence should be, the report should be written and represented. We can't say in TV, of course, we have to say on TV. Another example, the students teach statistics by Mr. Fahd once a week. Of course, Mr. Fahd here is the doer, which comes at the end of the passive voice. Teach is not correct because it must be put in the passive, so we have to put the verb be. And here we have once, which means one time per week. So we have to concentrate on the verb here, which is in the plural. Our sentence is are taught. And the is not correct here because it should be replaced by a or a. At this point, our lesson is over. Let me remind you of what you have already seen. Today we have dealt with the passive voice. We answered a question about what is the passive voice, why is it used, and how passive voice sentences are formulated. I hope that you have enjoyed my lesson. I look forward to seeing you again. I wish you good luck in your future endeavors, and thank you for watching.